Welcome back to the Crypto channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, Japan just broke the markets. That is right. We're now seeing the Japanese bond market reach highs that we've not seen since 2008, while the Japanese stock market is plummeting in the short term, alongside the US stock market also taking a bit of a short-term dip, especially in the early hours of trading. And of course, this is causing Bitcoin and crypto to dump in the short term, continuing a rejection from this important area of resistance in the case of Bitcoin. And also in the case of Ethereum and Solana and other altcoins, continuing short-term rejections from these key points of resistance. So I'll be talking about all of that and so much more later in the video, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, just before taking a look at the Bitcoin and crypto charts today, we need to take a look at this other information, this other news that's just happened today, because the Japanese bond market is essentially breaking, at least in the short term. We're seeing a major spike towards the upside in the Japanese bond market. This right here is the 2-year Japanese government bond, and it's just hit over 1% for the first time in almost 2 decades, since 2007 to 2008. And so this chart right here is on the monthly time frame. Each one of these candles is one entire month, but especially just recently, we've seen a major move towards the upside. It looks quite small on this time frame because this is zoomed all the way out, but we just saw a move from around 0.97% to now over 1%, which is a quite decent size move towards the upside in the Japanese bond rate yield. And just quickly explaining exactly why this matters, not just for the stock market, but also for the crypto market, really global markets. First of all, one of the main reasons is due to the fact that Japan is obviously a massive economy. The Bank of Japan is one of the largest central banks in the world. So we're talking about a lot of money here, an amount of money that can influence global markets, not just stick to the Japanese economy. And essentially, we could see right here during this entire period in between roughly 2010 after the '08 crisis, all the way up towards around 2023, give or take, this entire period, Japanese interest rates were extremely low. We're talking actually negative in some cases here. And so this line right around here is actually the 0% line, which means this entire period right here in between roughly 2016 to 2023, give or take, interest rates were actually negative in Japan, which means if you went to the bank to get a loan, the bank will actually pay you interest to actually borrow money from the bank. And so due to the fact that interest rates were so low for such a long period of time, a lot of investors out there, a lot of traders out there were taking massive loans from banks over in Japan at very, very low interest rates, and then going ahead and putting that money in either higher interest rate accounts like US treasuries, or perhaps just investing in the stock market or buying crypto, etc., because they're able to do that with effectively free money at 0 or even below 0 interest rates. But of course, that entire strategy, that entire trade will completely unwind and have to go the other direction if we see a spike to the upside in Japanese interest rates, which is now happening and has already been happening for over a year now, but especially right now, just over the last day or so, we've seen another big spike towards the upside in Japanese bond rates, in yields, in interest rates. And this is on the potential likely chance of the Bank of Japan raising interest rates at their next meeting, which once again puts a lot more pressure on anyone that was taking out loans at these lower interest rates that might have to roll over those loans at now much higher interest rates, which means a lot of these investors that were borrowing money at cheap interest rates to buy other investments like stocks or crypto now potentially have to dump those stocks or that crypto in order to pay back those loans before interest rates get even higher. And so this right here was known as the Japanese carry trade, and it has been unwinding for quite some time. But once again, especially just now in the short term, we've seen another big spike towards the upside in Japanese bond yields, which is just a further unwinding of this Japanese carry trade. And we can see the initial reaction in markets. This right here is the Japanese stock market index. We've seen a major dump over the last 1 day in the Japanese stock market, which right now in the immediate short term is having a slight little bounce, but overall obviously down over the last 1 day a couple of percent, which for a large index is quite a large move towards the downside in traditional markets. And if we're taking a look at the US stock market, this is the S&P 500 index on the 1 hour time frame, and in the early hours in the open, we actually opened quite a bit below the previous trading day close. And so once again, early in the trading day, we saw a decent drop towards the downside in the US stock market, which right now, as of recording this video during the trading day, is starting to take back some of those losses, starting to rebound a little bit, which is maybe some short-term good news. But overall, at least as of recording this video, we're still down compared to the previous close. And so ultimately, this was basically what shocked markets over the last one day or so and helped to cause a bit of a dump in the short term for Bitcoin and crypto. And of course, I talked about recently here on the channel, we need to wait for the stock markets to open back up again on Monday, because that's when we could potentially start to expect a lot more volatility, which is obviously now happening. And if we're taking a look at the weekly Bitcoin price chart, at least for now, this super trend indicator is still sitting in the red, indicating a larger bearish trend. And if we're taking a look at this weekly Bitcoin price chart, we still have this massive bearish divergence to watch out for, still technically active, not yet confirmed any invalidation signal to invalidate the bearish divergence, which means overall for a period of weeks or months, expect a lot of weakness, lacking bullish momentum for the price of Bitcoin. And of course, here and there on smaller timeframes, we can see the occasional short-term bullish relief, which we just saw over the last 1 week or so. But overall, the bigger picture still not looking too good. And obviously, that's exactly what I've been saying every day for almost 2 months now, since right back up here when the bearish divergence actually confirmed. But if we're taking a look at the daily Bitcoin price chart, obviously the price of Bitcoin is now officially seeing a massive rejection from this important area of resistance here, which was sitting in between around 92 to 94,000. And obviously that has been an area of resistance that I've been watching here on the channel. You can watch my last few videos. We've been obviously looking at this area of resistance here in between 92 to 94,000 as a very high probability in the chart where we could likely struggle or reject from. And obviously over the last few days, we didn't really see any harsh rejection, at least initially, which was a little bit of a good sign just over the weekend. But like I said, over the last few days, it's unlikely we'll see any breakout over the weekend. We have to wait for Monday to see what traditional markets do to figure out if we're going to see a breakout or not. And traditional markets just basically took a big old dump. And so obviously this has now given us our answer for short-term price action for the price of Bitcoin, ultimately now helping to cause a further rejection from that exact area of resistance in the short term. And so obviously, like I said, over the last few days, if the stock market actually held up pretty well here, which so far we're starting to see another little bounce, which could help the price of Bitcoin maybe in the short term. But if the stock market continued breaking out towards all-time highs, if none of this right here happened in the Japanese bond market, then it's possible we could have started to see a little bit more of a breakout potentially in the coming days. But overall, with this initial reaction in traditional markets, obviously that's not done Bitcoin and crypto any favors, at least in the short term here. And so now that we're seeing a continued rejection from this exact area of resistance, we're now retesting this support, possibly starting to break below support. But for now, we've not yet confirmed a daily candle close back below this support, at least as of right now. And this support that I'm talking about is sitting at approximately 85,000. So we still have some support potentially at give or take 85,000. But if we start to confirm a daily candle close well below that level, and especially if we fail to get back above that level, in that situation, obviously that would be another short-term bearish signal pointing towards a continued drop towards the next support. And the next major support is at give or take 75 to 76,000. And so in other words, we really need to actually hold on to this previous low, hold this as continued support for the price. Otherwise, we risk a potential further drop towards the next support, obviously. And if we're taking a look at this daily Bitcoin price chart, as I already mentioned over the last couple of days now, we already perfectly played out the oversold signal on the daily time frame for around almost 1 week worth of a short-term bullish relief, just like what we saw last time. But as I said, every day while this was playing out, I want to make it clear this does not confirm the bottom is in. It's possible we could continue the bearish trend later on, and this is just a short-term bullish move during a larger bearish trend, just like what we saw last time, a short-term bullish relief, and then we ultimately head lower, a little bit lower later on. But if I take away this circle here in the RSI on the daily time frame, we can see that right now, while the price of Bitcoin is possibly forming lower lows in the candle closes, which still needs to be confirmed, but that's a possibility right now. While that is happening, we're actually still forming higher lows in the daily Bitcoin RSI, which means we now have a potential bullish divergence forming. It's not currently confirmed. I want to make that clear, but a possible bullish divergence forming on the daily time frame. And that's also very similar to what we saw last time around 9 months ago, back at the end of February, early March. Obviously, back then we were already in a bit of a bearish trend on the daily Bitcoin price chart, and then we hit oversold. Then we saw a bullish relief for close to a week, and then we saw another dump into a new lower low in the price, but the RSI was forming higher lows over these next couple of lows here in the price. While the RSI was forming higher lows, obviously that was helping to form a bullish divergence, which ultimately helped in a much further bullish relief later on. And so once again, right now we're potentially in a very similar stage in the market to what we saw around early March, which means we're not in the clear yet. Yes, it's possible we could see a bit more bearish price action, maybe in the coming weeks, maybe in the next 1 month or so, but we do have possible bullish divergences to watch out for here on the daily time frame, for example. And if we're taking a look at the 3-day Bitcoin price chart, we're now almost just about to enter into oversold territories again in the 3-day Bitcoin RSI, which is also quite similar to what we saw over 3 years ago around mid 2022, because obviously we hit oversold, saw a bit of a sideways consolidation, and then we actually saw another major dip and then hit oversold again in mid 2022, and then we saw a further bullish relief later on. And so once again, we're not yet back in oversold on the 3-day time frame, which means it's possible we could head a little bit lower before seeing another bullish relief. But overall, this is something to keep an eye on in the coming days and weeks. But remember, we're still looking quite weak on the much larger time frames as a result of this massive bearish divergence still active on the weekly time frame. So yes, we could see bullish release from time to time in the shorter term, like what we saw over the last 1 week. But at least for now, if we're looking at the bigger picture, still expect a lot of weakness for Bitcoin, which is what I've been saying basically every day since all the way back up here. And if we're taking a look at the much shorter term, looking at the 6-hour Bitcoin price chart, it's now very much clear that that previous short-term bullish divergence is completely over. We've now seen multiple invalidation signals invalidating the bullish divergence. So obviously it played out very nicely here for roughly around 1 week. And then we ran into that major point of resistance right here, causing the price to basically stop heading higher and started to struggle around that resistance, which was to be expected. But something else to mention here on the 6-hour Bitcoin price chart is of course the fact that the 6-hour Bitcoin RSI is once again entering into oversold territories. And the last few times we hit oversold in the 6-hour Bitcoin RSI, that was a signal telling us that we're potentially very close to a local low before maybe a slight little bounce or sideways consolidation. Remember, an oversold signal is not a bottom signal. It does not mean that's the end of the bearish trend and we're about to see a major bullish reversal. It does not mean that, but it does mean that we've gone too far to the downside too quickly in the immediate short term, and very soon we're going to need a little bit of time to reset the RSI out of oversold, which means once again either a bit of sideways price action, maybe a very, very slight bounce. But once again, as I've been saying throughout this entire period right here, don't expect significant bullish momentum. Overall, the bullish price action that we're seeing is just simply short-term bullish price action, playing out signals like a bullish divergence, playing out, say, an oversold signal or bouncing from support. But overall, the bigger picture is still looking relatively weak if we're talking about multiple weeks or months. And if you're listening to what I just said and you're a beginner into crypto, you might be making the mistake that a lot of beginners make in thinking that right now there's no opportunity anymore in crypto. It's already over because we're now heading down. But that is the furthest from the truth. There's always opportunity in the crypto market if you know what you're doing. For example, a very basic example would be if you're shorting crypto, shorting Bitcoin during a bearish move, you can actually be profiting along the way towards the downside as an example. Or if you're more of a spot trader, you like just buying and holding on the spot market. In that situation, you could just simply wait and see for some lower prices to accumulate crypto at cheaper prices if you're more of a long-term holder. Once again, not financial advice, but there's still ways to make money, still opportunities in the crypto market, even if we're looking more bearish. And just remember, it's usually what looks like the worst times in the market, the most bearish periods in the market, that actually turn out to be the best opportunities in the crypto market if you stick through the times, stick through the hard times. And so, for example, if you're involved in crypto during 2022, especially the second half of 2022, after the Luna crash, we saw a lot of platforms like FTX collapse near the end of 2022. Crypto was massively down from the highs. It looked like a very bad period. It looked like everything was over for crypto. But if you simply stuck through it all and stuck to your plan, whatever that might have have been, then you would have done very well in the coming 1 to 2 years in the next major recovery. And so if you haven't done so already, this is definitely the time to get set up ready to go on a crypto exchange to take advantage of the next trading opportunity. And if you're using the first link below this video in the description and in the pinned comment, that first link will take you to this page right here, where you can also take advantage of massive bonuses over on the Pinex crypto exchange that are only available using that link. For example, if you deposit as little as $100, you get a $200 bonus into your account. If you deposit, say, $1,000, you get a $600 bonus. If you deposit these much larger amounts, you can get up to 40,000 USDT as a deposit bonus. This is basically free money from the exchange deposited into your account alongside your initial deposit. And then of course you could use the deposit bonus, use the exchange's money in order to actually open one of these Bitcoin trades if you want to. So without even risking your own money, you could be using the exchange's money. And then if you profit from that trade, of course, you can withdraw profits. If you lose the money, you're losing the exchange's money. But as you can see right here, these bonuses are exclusively available for invited users. You have to simply make your Pinex account using that link below the video in order to actually claim these bonuses. Unfortunately, if you don't use that link to make your account, you can't claim any of these bonuses here. So if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, or getting prepared, getting set up, ready to go to take the next trading opportunity, you might as well get set up ready to go using that first link below the video. But if you want a no KYC crypto exchange, an exchange that I also use for long positions and short positions, for that, definitely check out the second link below this video in the description and in the pinned comment. That link right there will take you to 2bit. It'll take you specifically to this page right here over on 2bit, where you could also take advantage of major bonuses. First of all, there's also deposit bonuses that are only exclusive for that link. But on top of that, there's also now an event running where there's trader protection and recovery funds. So for example, for new users making your account for the first time using that link below the video, during this event, you can get a 100% loss protection on your first futures trade up to 200 USDT in trial funds. And on top of that, if you get liquidated on one of your trades over 50 USDT during this event that's running right now over on 2bit, if you get liquidated over 50 USDT, you may be eligible for recovery compensation up to 1000 USDT. So for example, if you happen to be in, say, a long position before this dump and you got liquidated during this event over on 2bit, if you used the link below the video to make your account, then you could potentially get some of that money back. And so once again, if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out. Second link below the video. And remember, 2bit is also a no KYC exchange. But with that being said, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, and of course, over the last one day, over the last half a day, we have been seeing that rejection, that short-term dump in the Bitcoin and crypto market as a result of what I talked about in the beginning of this video. But keep in mind, we still have a massive amount of liquidity above the price of Bitcoin, especially at give or take 94,000. So over the last one day, despite this latest dump, that liquidity has not changed. We still have a lot of short positions that would get wiped out of the market if the price crosses above roughly 94,000. And so potentially at some point later on, not necessarily in the next few hours or in the next day, but maybe within the next couple of weeks, it is possible we could see another move back up towards that area on the price chart to wipe out that liquidity. But remember, this is not the only thing that influences the price of Bitcoin. We have to consider all of this information to figure out what is likely going to happen for Bitcoin and crypto. So as always, for example, we cannot ignore resistance where the price could possibly struggle at or reject from as another example of information that can influence the price of Bitcoin. But with that being said, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin dominance chart on the daily time frame, and honestly, over the last 1 week or so, for the most part, we've kind of just been bouncing around relatively sideways. So at least for now, it's still looking quite neutral here in the Bitcoin dominance, at least in the short term. We don't really have a strong trend to either direction, a strong bearish trend or strong bullish trend, at least right now in the Bitcoin dominance, which basically means a lot of the major altcoins out there on average will likely be performing very similar to whatever Bitcoin is doing. So in other words, if of course Bitcoin's dumping as it is doing right now in the short term, then expect something similar to this for a lot of the major altcoins. And if we're taking a look at Ethereum on the daily time frame, that's exactly what is now happening for Ethereum. Obviously, we are continuing a short-term dump and a perfect rejection from this Fibonacci level, acting as strong resistance based on previous Fibonacci support, flipping into new resistance, and that level sitting at around 3,040. So really in between 3,000 to 3.1k is the strong area of resistance that I've been warning about and looking at every single day since the moment we bounced from this support. And so obviously in the previous dump over a week ago, around 2 weeks ago, we dumped down towards this 50% retracement level, acting as support at just above 2.6k. So really in between 2.6k to 2.7k is still an area of support to watch out for, which we're potentially now about to retest. And then once again, we bounced previously from that area of support exactly towards this area of resistance and perfectly rejected from that resistance following the rejection of Bitcoin in the short term. And so overall, I do expect as a very likely scenario, a retest now of this support in the short term in between 2.6k to 2.7k. And once again, that is still an area of support, which means it's possible we could start to slow down the bearish price action, maybe see a very slight little bounce around that area. But if, for example, the price of ETH actually confirms a break below that area of support, let's just say if we confirm, say, a daily candle close below 2.6k and actually fail to get back above that area, in that situation, that'll be a very bearish signal, at least in the short term, pointing towards a move towards this next major area of support, sitting in between around 2.1k to 2250. So roughly around 2.2k would be the next major price target towards the downside if we first confirm a break below 2.6k to 2.7k. That is the immediate support to pay attention to. And if we're taking a look at this daily Ethereum price chart, obviously around a week ago, we confirmed an oversold signal. So like I said back then, we'll likely see a short-term bullish relief for the next few days, maybe the next 1 week or so. But as I've been clear this entire time, this is not necessarily a bottom signal. Obviously, we confirmed an oversold signal back here. We got close to oversold back here. And what came next was, of course, a short-term bullish relief in the price, but not a massive reversal out of the larger bearish trend. We ultimately remained in the bearish trend and ultimately saw a new lower low at some point later on. And so obviously, this is exactly what is now playing out. This has been perfectly playing out over the last 1 week or so in the form of a short-term bullish relief, but is now ended and obviously now continuing the larger bearish trend that we've already been in for months now. But the good news is that we also are about to hit oversold again in the daily Ethereum RSI. And on top of that, if we don't quite hit oversold, we also have a possible bullish divergence forming right now on the Ethereum price chart. Once again, not currently confirmed. I want to make that clear, but a possible bullish divergence forming, as we do have possible lower lows forming in the price in the candle closes, which still needs to be confirmed. And of course, higher lows still currently forming in the daily Ethereum RSI. So that is something to pay attention to in the coming days. And if we're taking a look at the price of Solana on the 2-day time frame, it's a very similar situation for Solana, technically still within a larger bearish trend, forming larger bearish price structure like lower highs and lower lows, for example. And of course, we've also continued a perfect rejection from my exact area of resistance, sitting in between 143 to 147, which is the exact area I've been targeting and warning about ever since we saw this previous bounce here. And so ultimately continue to expect a lot of resistance in this area in between 143 to 147 if the price actually gets back up there. And as for support, we're now, as I recorded this video, testing this level of support at roughly around 124. So it's possible we could still find some support around this level on the price chart. But if we start confirming, especially candle closes below 124, and especially if we fail to get back above that level, in that situation, of course, that'll be a short-term bearish signal pointing towards another short-term bearish move towards the next support, which in that case would be sitting at roughly around $105. So just above $100 would be the next major target if we first confirm a proper break below roughly 124. But like I've been saying throughout the video, for Bitcoin and Ethereum, we also have a possible bullish divergence forming right now for Solana on the 2-day time frame and also visible on other time frames as well. But once again, possible lower lows in the price in the candle closes forming but not confirmed, and higher lows still currently forming in the RSI. So it's something to pay attention to in the coming days, but I want to make this clear that is not yet confirmed. And if we're taking a look at the price of XRP on the weekly time frame, technically speaking, what is of course confirmed and has already been perfectly playing out over multiple months now is this massive bearish divergence on the weekly XRP price chart, which I did actually warn about here on this channel all the way back here in end of July, early August. And a lot of people actually were very negative here on the channel when I was talking about this multi-month pullback coming very soon. A lot of people were telling me I'm going to be completely wrong about this massive pullback coming very soon. But obviously, at least for now, this is still active. This is still perfectly playing out as predicted. Still expect a lot of weakness on the larger time frames with the occasional short-term bullish relief here and there. And if we're taking a look at this daily XRP price chart, of course, what has been playing out in the shorter term for the last 1 week or so has been a shorter term bullish divergence with lower lows in the price and higher lows in the RSI. And of course, that resulted in a short-term bullish relief, followed by a bit of choppy sideways price action up towards this point of resistance, which was starting at roughly around $2.30, really in between $2.30 to $2.40 as a strong area of resistance. And we got within about 1 cent of $2.30 before we perfectly rejected and started to struggle around that resistance. But as usual, XRP, along with a lot of the major altcoins, are highly correlated to each other and highly correlated to what Bitcoin is doing. So as I usually say, follow Bitcoin to figure out what is likely going to happen for a lot of the altcoin market. So of course, with Bitcoin seeing a short-term dump following traditional markets dumping, of course, in the short term, this is also flowing over to XRP, playing out a short-term dump. And right now, as of recording this video, the price of XRP is running into roughly $2, and it's possible we could find some support in between around $2 to $2.05. But if we start breaking back below $2, especially with a daily candle close below that level, and especially if we fail to get back above that level, in that situation, it would likely see a continued move towards around $1.90. And if we break below that, expect to move down towards $1.80. If we break below that, expect to move down towards $1.60. Those are all of the key points of support to watch out for on the daily XRP price chart. And also, if the price dumps a little bit lower, keep in mind we possibly have a new bullish divergence forming if the RSI is still sitting in these higher lows, which are currently forming, while the price potentially creates a new lower low. So even if the price heads a little bit lower in the shorter term, that's not necessarily all that bad if we ultimately confirm a new bullish divergence in the coming days. But I want to make that clear, at least for now, that possible new bullish divergence is not currently confirmed. So at least for now, it's just possibly something to pay attention to in the coming days, possibly forming, not confirmed. And if we're taking a quick look at the price of Chainlink on the daily time frame, obviously it's a very similar situation for Chainlink as what I've been saying throughout the video. Of course, we're still within a larger bearish trend, forming larger bearish price structure like lower highs, lower lows, for example, as I've been saying for months now on the channel. So don't be fooled by short-term bullish moves or short-term bullish reliefs during the larger bearish trend that is still currently active. And of course, over the last few days or so, we have seen a continued rejection now from this point of resistance, which was sitting at around $13.40. So obviously we failed any breakout attempt above $13.40. So that's still acting as strong resistance. If the price actually gets back up there, still expect a lot of resistance at around $13.40. And as for support to watch out for, we're just now potentially starting to break below around $12. So the next major support to watch out for is sitting in between roughly $11.60 to $11.70. That is the next immediate target, the next point of support. But if we start breaking below $11.60, in that situation, the next target will be sitting at pretty much exactly $11. But like I've also been saying throughout the video, we have a possible bullish divergence forming right now for Chainlink on the daily time frame, but not yet confirmed. I want to make that clear, but we do have possible lower lows forming in the price in the candle closes, which still needs to be confirmed, and higher lows currently still forming in the daily Chainlink RSI. So once again, something just to keep an eye on over the coming days in case it potentially confirms. And of course, if it does confirm in the coming days, that can result in a little bit of a short-term bullish relief. But once again, don't be fooled by those short-term bullish reliefs. Yes, they can be good in the short term, but overall, we're still within a much larger bearish trend. But remember, you can still make money along the way towards the downside using short positions and things like that. And of course, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of any crypto, check out those links below this video to those exchanges if you want to claim the massive bonuses that are only available using those links. And if you want to actually know how you can make money from trading crypto, no matter what the price is doing, then make sure to watch these videos popping up right here on your screen. The video in the top left shows you how you can profit from bullish or bearish price action using long positions or short positions. And the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.